Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. I am super excited to be joined by a bunch of the Red guys. We've got so many to name. We've got James Lucarelli, Cleigh Reed, Jonathan Petz. We've got Matt and Frank in the background. Guys, thanks so much for being here. How's everybody doing today?
Doing great, Scott. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's our absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure to have you guys here. So we're going to kick this off. We've got a short little video that you wanted to play. Spoiler alert, it's for something that we've all been waiting for and anticipating greatly. So here we go. We're going to jump right into that.
It'd be strange, it'd be strange, it'd be strange. I'll be trying to find a way to make a change. Break the chain, break the chain, break the chains. I'll be trying to find a way to break the chains. It'd be strange, it'd be strange, it'd be strange. I'll be trying to find a way to make a change. It'd be strange, it'd be strange, it'd be strange. I'll be trying to find a way to make a change. Break the chain, break the chain, break the chains. I'll be trying to find a way to break the chains.
All right. There it is, the V-Raptor, right?
Pretty fun.
Yeah. That's super exciting. Congratulations to you guys, for getting that out there. I know everybody's been anticipating that and waiting for it. I can date myself here, and I can, date myself back to remembering when Red first announced their first cameras and, B&H kind of starting to create those partnerships and things like that. So it's exciting to get everybody all in one room and be able to kind of talk about some of the Red stuff. So I'm not going to take up any more of anybody's time because nobody came here to see me. It's okay. I'm comfortable with that. But if you have any questions, if there's anything that you wanted to ask the guys, make sure you use on Zoom the Q&A tab for live stream, Facebook, YouTube, any of those avenues. You go ahead and drop any comments in the comments section and we'll get to them as we can. But otherwise, James, Jonathan, Cleigh, you guys take it away. I'm going to go hide in the background and just enjoy.
Cool. Well, thanks for kicking us off, Scott. And thanks for everyone else for hosting us here on the B&H team. It's been a real pleasure to join this and to give everyone really an inside look at Red. And we've got the esteemed Solitary Series team here with Jonathan Petz and Cleigh Reed. And before we jump right into it, I think it'd be best to let everyone kind of introduce ourselves and maybe talk a little bit more about what you do at Red. So why don't you go ahead, and I see Cleigh nodding, so we're gonna go ahead and go to Cleigh first.
I'm stoked. I was super excited. We started with what I do here. So I made that video that you guys just watched. And so that's sort of the core of what I get to do, but really I get to wear a lot of hats outside of that and get to use my joy and passion for creativity all the time. So I'm so lucky and happy to play with cameras. And I know when I'm playing with new cameras and using new technologies, I'm usually knocking on Johnny's ear going, hey, what about this one? Come on, take it away, John.
So just like Cleigh said, many people wear many hats at Red. So I head up our kind of training and product demos here in Europe. And I also am part of the product team, and I kind of been honing in on the accessories for V-Raptor. So they're kind of my little babies at the moment. So really looking forward to touching on all the cool accessories we've got for V-Raptor. Looking forward to showing you what we've got ahead today.
Cool. And I've been with Red for almost 10 years, a little bit later this month. Right now, I'm doing a lot of the training and a lot of the global education, but really I'm excited because much like these two gentlemen right here, we're all shooters. So we do enjoy getting these cameras out in the field and getting to work hands-on with our customers. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Talk about the Red Arsenal, talk about it. And before we jump into it, I think we should give a little lay of the land here. I'm pointing into a DSMC2 Gemini. And if you guys see the live feed coming over my shoulder, that's also from another DSMC2 Monstro. I've got a KOMODO ST right here. And I think why a couple of us have tuned in, we've got the brand new V-Raptor ST as well. So I'm going to put these down before I make any bobbles here. Oh, yep, we've got more cameras than hands, but we will get hands-on virtually here at the end. But I do want to just kind of go over, we are going to do a little bit of a presentation. Please stay tuned, ask questions, because we will do that at the end. And let's just go ahead and jump right into it.
Yeah.
And this goes for you too, Johnny and Cleigh. I want you guys to jump in as well. So let's go ahead and we're going to start with our presentation here. And let's go, oops, we don't want to Tarantino it and start from the end. Let's go right to the beginning here. And once again, big thanks to our partners at B&H for hosting us. We're going to give you guys all an inside look at Red and talk a little bit more about our products. Now, if you didn't see it, the tech specs for the brand new V-Raptor 8K are live on red.com. And we're not going to sit here and show you tech specs, but if you did want to go ahead and just look at the numbers, they are fully available right there on red.com. Now, talking about the V-Raptor 8K, I think the great thing that comes up first is it a sensor? Is it a camera? And I understand that question because in our history, we kind of had a tick and a talk or an A and a B cycle where maybe there was a camera brain and then a sensor a few years later, and there was a time of interchangeability. That is not the case with this camera. V-Raptor is both the camera and the sensor. And as you can see there, it is a 35.4 megapixel full frame or VistaVision sensor, but it's also got some really great things like PDAF or phase detection autofocus, 17 plus stops of dynamic range, and some other key things that we'll talk about here. Now, when we think about, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's just great to look at like those kind of specs in a flexible form factor. And I know we're used to looking at some of the DSMC2 stuff, but man, the ability to have just about everything you need right built into the camera and moving back towards, you know, our new touchscreen on the top has a lot of cool things going on. And it's all really reinforced by the amazing specs that we're getting out of this machine.
And you can see some of the specs right here. I think right after the sensor, we go right to frame rates, we go right to speed. And for anyone familiar with our frame rates with the DSMC2 camera, we're doubling those. So 8K 120, 4K up to almost 300 frames or up to 300 frames per second if you're shooting that in widescreen, and an extremely fast 2K 600 frames per second. And we're going to show you some examples of that in just a second. And another great thing to keep in mind is that this is a full frame or VistaVision sensor, but it's also multi-format. So if you have Super 35 lenses, anamorphic lenses, spherical lenses, this is a great sensor for you because essentially you have a multi-format option here that'll cover all of your creative lens options. We'll talk a little bit more about the additional proxies in camera. And I think really when we start looking at some of the benefits here of this new system, it's also that really fast media, right? You would, if you didn't have that extremely fast CFExpress type B media, which is up to 1700 megabytes per second here, that's what's going to allow you to record that extremely fast 8K 120. And that'll max out at around 800 megabytes per second. So there is still some top end room there on those cards. But you can see that right here on that CFExpress door right here on the camera left-hand side. And I know Cleigh mentioned that little form factor. You can see it here, and we'll do a size comparison in just a second here. It's about just a little bit smaller than your DSMC2 camera bodies, and it is a tad larger than your KOMODO, but it sits right there, right in between with that ultralight form factor. And I think the great thing that Cleigh pointed out, you have all of that I/O right there. Those two full-size 12G SDIs allowing for dual 4K monitoring mirrored or independent 1080 monitoring if you wanted to have that separate. You also have your 5-pin XLR adapter right there, so you could have dual 3-pin XLR with phantom powered mic and line level. You can also see your EXT port, your 11 to 17 volts power, as well as that built-in USB-C, which I'm really excited to talk about here for some of the live stream capabilities and some of the things that we're doing right now.
Yeah, if you were at all interested in the KOMODO link, right? If you're looking at FTPS into your camera, if you're doing remote camera systems, things like that, all of that's going to be hugely benefited by the connectivity in that little USB-C port. Seems like such a simple thing, but really, for me, it opens up a lot of possibilities and a lot of ease of use when you get into that streaming world and stuff like that.
And is that a little screw hole that I see right there, right next to that?
Yep, lock that bad boy in. This is, once again, comes back to things like trap cameras, right? Somewhere where the elements might be involved, the camera might get bumped into by something, any of that, it's really good to have that connection locked in by a locking USB-C.
Mm-hmm. And right adjacent to that, you can see our Wi-Fi antenna right there, and that is removable or expandable. I know when I was getting that into a water housing, maybe something that you would take off temporarily, but you can put that back on. And once again, something that you can expand if you did want to get a larger antenna. And you can't really see it from this side, but we are going to talk about the new user interface. And I'm really excited about this because even maybe we're using a shot over. I just mentioned a water housing. Maybe you don't have that touchscreen handy, and having that built-in side user interface on the camera right side, right where everyone wants it to be, is very, very helpful and beneficial. And we'll get to that here in just a second.
Now, yeah, and even just to add on, I just wanted to add on because I've been super stoked on the wireless connectivity features anyway. The USB-C is awesome, but when it comes to camera control for car rigs and things like that, I've been using the heck out of Red Control. It's been like a full on, right? See, both James and I are like, am I in focus? I don't even have to guess. I can just look at my phone and make sure. All of that stuff gives you these huge benefits, and moving towards an ecosystem that supports that for me is something I'm super excited about with the camera. I was a little too stoked. I had to add in.
Well, and I don't know if you noticed this, right? I have both a Android and a iPhone, so it works with both types of devices, as well as your iPads or anything that can connect to the internet. And there is such thing as too many cooks in the kitchen, but that's where we would say set up a password and dedicate your individual roles for everyone as they go ahead and start working around the camera.
Yeah,
perfect. Now let's talk about the size comparison here. I think it's really nice to just see all these side by side, and we'll start first with the Ranger and then the DSMC2 camera. Now I heard it come out earlier. DSMC2 stands for Digital Stills Motion Camera, and this is our version 2. And you can see that both the profiles of these two cameras are very similar, because these would be using our DSMC2 accessories. Next, you're going to see our V-Raptor over here, which is the first of the DSMC3 platform. And you can notice that the size is smaller and very comparable to DSMC2, but the form factor did shrink. And remember, you're not having to add additional modules. What you're seeing right there is pretty much shoot ready if we wanted to throw a monitor and a lens on that and maybe that DC power. And then lastly, there's our KOMODO. And I wanted to bring up, is KOMODO DSMC2? Is it DSMC3? It really is something that kind of sat in between the two cameras. And really, this is more for accessories. When it comes to Red branded accessories, DSMC3 is primarily just for V-Raptor. DSMC2 is Ranger and for DSMC2. And really, KOMODO accessories are for KOMODO. And you can always check our third-party compatibility page where you can always see that for additional information.
Yep.
Now, did you guys want to say anything here about the size and the form factor? I can see that, here we have our Ranger with our integrated side user interface. And then now look at what we've taken that feedback here with V-Raptor. I think that
that's one of the things where everyone who I've shown the camera to so far has always been shocked. It was the same with KOMODO. Everyone who saw KOMODO was like, this thing's tiny. Everyone who's seen V-Raptor so far has gone, this thing is tiny. And as Cleigh said, when you've got so much packed into it, that's where you start to think of really how powerful this camera is, having just 2 SDI ports built in, one for a log feed and a LUT feed, and having your AEC be able to come over and really easily navigate the menu with tactile buttons on a larger screen. All those things in such a compact body have been, from someone who's worked on set, is like, this is amazing for how small it is.
Yeah, and as someone who really pushed modularity for a long time, I still believe in the concepts that modularity offers. But I think the reality is once we start looking at this type of technology and this type of functionality in a small form factor, things like modules are actually a detriment to maintaining your heat and having good electric connections through everything. It's like there's a lot of things that the modularity complicates in the original DSMC2 systems that are a little bit clarified in V-Raptor, and you still get options to adapt to different lenses. You still get options to adapt to different batteries and things like that, but you're doing it in a way where the form factor has been engineered to accomplish these tasks that are no mean feat, right? They're very insanely technical tasks that these cameras are doing. And in doing so, we've still kept to that idea of a smaller camera on set is an easier camera to work with in just about any circumstance.
Mm-hmm. And let's not forget, all of these cameras, as well as our previous Red cameras, are recording to Redcode. So really, as long as you're recording to Redcode and you're using either matching lenses or comparable lenses and maybe a similar workflow, really it's not going to be something where you're going to have any issue color matching across all of your footage here. It's definitely something where I know I've experienced that with my Helium and my KOMODO and now my V-Raptor. So looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, and a great example is, like James said earlier, he's on DSMC2s. I'm broadcasting from a KOMODO right now. I think we're all kind of showing this idea that we all fit in perfectly well. We have different lighting conditions, and that's going to make the big decision on whose setting looks different than anybody else's. The color science really simply baked into these clips. That's, it's amazing to work with.
Well, the thing is, it's about having that base layer. Different sensors will have different ways that they go in the highlights and the shadows, but being able to have a nice base layer makes it easier to start matching from that point. If you have 2 completely different cameras, you're starting completely from fresh, trying to match some third-party action camera to your Monstro. But matching a Monstro and a KOMODO, or a V-Raptor and a KOMODO, suddenly becomes a lot easier because of that common pipeline.
Mm-hmm. And we actually have a really good comparative slide where we can show all of the different sensors. And it's really great because when you start talking about maybe something like dual sensitivity with Gemini or global shutter with Komodo, you still have the benefits of individual sensors, but you still have the compatibility to, back to Johnny's point, of having that neutral starting point, that base point to come from. Now, when we talk about V-Raptor, I think it's great to talk about who is this potentially for? Is it for the Zack Snyders and the ASC cinematographers that are the A and B cameras on the largest productions to date? Or is it maybe someone like myself or someone that owns a camera that's working with a local production or sports team or a local business? And I don't want to say streaming, but maybe I'm someone that got in on Komodo and I use this for straight web content. Really, is this camera made for me? It's really made for all three of us here. Notice that all of these features here, whether it's the raw format, the small form factor, the XLR inputs here, or increased frame rate and capabilities, are going to allow you to either keep your existing Red, upgrade to the newest Red, or really add another tool to your arsenal here. And I think that's one of the benefits here of having this ultra small form factor is we're getting some creative ideas and creative ways to get some more shots off that list.
Definitely. And taking one camera around with you to do those different tasks is something that's really beneficial as far as ease of use and not having extra time to, okay, now let's move on to this specialty camera for this one shot. That's a reset, right? That's a whole chunk of time on set that you could avoid by using a camera that has some of these features included. A lot of the stuff like the multi-format sensor stuff, being able to shoot in much higher frame rates, all of that just means it's a camera body that you can use in these different scenarios without having to change much about it, which to me is a huge benefit for moving quickly. And it speaks to the reality that we're all on borrowed time on these productions most of the time, right? We're all trying to cram everything in by the end of the day, whether you're doing it for a personal project or you're doing it for a corporate client or you're doing it for a narrative piece. Everyone's trying to make their day. And the faster we can make things on set, I think the happier every one of those people involved are going to be.
So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the front of the camera here. And I'm just making sure that everyone, are we still good? Sorry, just making sure.
Good, James.
Okay, I saw, I heard the internet dump. Last thing you ever want to do is do a live stream and then hear something dip out and you think you're the only one that's seeing the black screen. So as long as we're still doing good and I see your guys' faces smiling, I think we're doing great. Now, we talked about the lens mounts and how they maybe have expanded, right? You now have the ability to use full frame lenses. And for anyone that came from a Komodo.
What was that?
Oh, I think
Is that James?
James has now dropped
All right.
out. But,
now he has.
But I mean,
I think we can start taking it.
What James was really getting at there was the flexibility that the RF mount brought with Komodo, now expanded on V-Raptor. And one of the big things that we've learned and kind of brought to V-Raptor is that locking lever that locks down any mounts or lenses that you attach. You know, if you're using slightly larger primes, if you're using Supreme primes or something like that, being able to lock the mount down is really, really vital if you've got some high torque motors, high gear motors, those kind of things to really secure that mount down. And some of the exciting things that I've seen a lot of people talking about is when you go into 6K S35, that allows you to use some of the speed boosters from, from Canon that we've seen, and you start to get that full frame field of view at 6K S35, which is really cool. And it looks like James has dropped off, so I'm going to very quickly jump over to the presentation and
And here, I'll fill some time for you while we do that. So what I think is great about that RF mount is really the flexibility. So once you're dealing with a mirrorless sensor, you're talking about a very, very large array of different lenses you can put on here. You're really only limited by not being able to use other mirrorless camera systems lenses because of the flange depth. And also, I just wanted to touch on that locking ring that huge lenses, super important. Also, if you're doing focus control motors, it really helps, right? So I use a gimbal all the time, and I'm either controlling with a thumb wheel on the handle of the ring, or I have an AC pulling focus for me. And there's nothing worse than seeing the lens move a little bit as you initiate that focus rack. It might be at, this clutch moment in what's happening, and the thing gives a little move or the focus isn't quite right because of a little bit of play in there. And so now we've got something that just right on the camera locks that in instead of needing a support bracket for your mount.
I mean, one of the kind of rules of thumb is kind of if the lens is heavier than the body itself, it should probably need some form of support. You know, so, you know, if you're planning on putting on a massive, you know, CN 1000 mil lens or an Ingenue 24 to 290, something like that, you're going to need some extra support for that. But, you know, that's just what this mount helps, is just lock those down a little bit tighter, as Cleigh was saying. But I think while we're waiting for James, moving on to the micro V-lock plate. And this is one of the things that allowed us to really keep the form factor so small. You know, had we gone for a fully fledged V-mount, that meant a larger camera, and that was one of the requirements for this camera, to keep it as small as possible. And I know, Cleigh, you're always working out of backpacks, so having a compactor form factor with batteries is better, because the more you can fit in your bag.
Exactly. And man, am I a fan of these micro V-locks. I know it's a different standard, right? So it's not your classic brick or something like that that's full size V-lock. However, I mean, getting 98 watt hours to 150 watt hours off this little chunk of battery that fits right on the back of this camera, for me, as someone, like you said, who keeps the camera in a backpack a lot of the time and is trying to move around pretty quickly and often documenting things, or in studio situations with MoCos and things like that, man, when I'm using those types of functionality, having a tight little package with a battery that'll last me just long enough, and being able to stack 5 batteries in my backpack at, you know, half the size is just great. Like it's really beneficial.
I mean, one of the things to call out there is kind of the power draw. So 8K, 17.9, 23.98, 24 FPS, we're looking at around 65 watts. Go up to 120 FPS, you're looking at around 75 watts. So our Redvolt Micro V that is, you know, 98 watt hours, you're looking at around an hour and a half-ish, you know, obviously a little bit less if you're shooting a lot of 120 FPS, but it's still an efficient camera for, you know, these tiny batteries, considering you can sling 4 of these, 5 of these in a backpack very, very easily. The ones that we have are flight safe, so it's a very easy camera to travel with. Just like with Komodo, you could chuck in a load of Canon BP batteries, 10 of those in a backpack, and you're fine.
And if you're familiar with the DSMC2 power draw, it's very similar. So if I knew I was getting about right around an hour on these, or, you know, you do have for maybe longer lenses, here's one of the Titan Micro Vs. This is the 150 watt hour. Really nice, because this is about as comparable as I can get to my red brick. And once again, staying in that nice, small, slim form factor right there too. They also make a 45, but this one is a little too quick for my liking.
And one really cool thing is, if you turn the camera off, you've got a battery attached, you plug in the DC, and you're charging those batteries. So if you walk away over lunch, leave the camera on, that battery is going to hopefully be fully charged by the time you get back. And, you know, it's definitely no high-speed charger, but it's a really quick charger. So, you know, you can get back and get a substantial amount of juice back by the time you've finished having your coffee or something.
It's been huge on trips. I was just going to say that feature for me has been gigantic. You look at our little 2-bay charger that we're making now, that's really nice and small and compact with Core. That thing is awesome, but it's just 2 batteries, right? So if I go and I drain all 4 batteries during the course of the day, I'm back at the hotel trying to get ready for the next day. Charging 3 at once instead of 2 at once actually means like a lot easier time for me. I just switch that 1 battery and I'm ready to go with my 4 batteries charged in the morning. And
you've only got to wake up once during the night to change anything.
Exactly. Exactly.
And your battery belt clip.
Here are the batteries, just showing that charger there really quickly. One of the things we've kind of seen, you know, what's unique about the, you know, Core batteries. We've worked with Core on these batteries to get them made. And there's a couple of changes over the normally available Core batteries. Firstly, we've upgraded from 10 amps to 12 amps. And one of the really cool things, feature-wise, is we've got a new communication, you know, protocol using SM bus, where the battery will tell the camera the current amp load. And this is really important when you're thinking of, you know, brownouts, where you plug on that Preston, focus, iris, zoom, you have all of them going at the same time, and the camera browns out because it's drawing too much power. This feature, which is coming soon, allows you to monitor that and see, oh, I've got 11 amps being drawn through the D-tap, through the camera. The camera's also got an accessory plugged onto it. You can see everything as a total as to what's being drawn, which previously in camera, the camera will only give you the information about what it itself is drawing, not what the battery's doing, or a D-tap or a 2-pin LEMO. So that's really cool and coming soon.
going to be huge for people running stuff like Preston's off their D-tap on the back of the camera. It's like just having that little extra bit of knowledge to be able to look in there and know exactly what's happening and ensure that you're not going to have something like a brownout is going to be huge for people on set, I think.
On to media. James, do you want to take this one?
No, go right ahead.
Okay, yeah. So, the media, as James said, this is something where, we needed a high-speed medium to be able to, shoot 120 FPS or 600 FPS. And we've gone through a large amount of testing with cards. We've worked with Angelbird on our own branded cards. And we've seen a lot of questions about, can we use other manufacturers? And, we are working very hard to expand the list. But one of the issues that could arise through not using approved media is you may run into issues with write speeds. Now, a lot of cards will advertise, a very high read and write data rate, but that's only for a short burst. So we've worked with Angelbird on this card to ensure that it can sustain those read and write speeds if you want to shoot 8K 120 FPS for the full duration of the card. And that's what we're ensuring in working with other manufacturers that will be announced hopefully very soon. So for the moment, you should really be ensuring you're using approved media so you don't run into any corrupt clips or write speed errors. But even then, that means that with these super fast cards, you download them super quickly. I know, Cleigh, traveling a lot, downloading media is important because it means you're not sat around waiting for the card to download.
Exactly. It's really big. And all of these little advancements make, like I said, that little bit of extra time on set or that little bit of extra sleep instead of waking up to change over cards. And also, I mean, I think it's just important as you say that stuff, that sounds like, oh, okay, we're expanding the list, all this. This is on the edge of what's possible. We're just on this side of what's technically possible in camera technology. And that's one of the things I have been like a fan of Red since day one and been at the company since 2012. And I'm continually excited and surprised and amazed at what is able to come out of these cameras. But it's with the attitude of we're going to push it as far as we can take it, all the way right to the edge. And that's how you advance. But it's also like how we help other companies as well in that idea of, okay, let's push harder. Let's make sure that those are sustained speeds across these cards and find out which ones really speak to that level of quality. It's a cool, to me, it's like, I know it can be tough for people to move on to new technologies. And sometimes that comes with the barrier of, needing to invest in some of that technology. But for my 2 cents, the things that are possible in this new wave of cameras is just unbelievable.
Especially how small they are. They are tiny.
Right.
And Johnny's holding up the card and I'm holding up the reader. And I do want to call out, it is a completely different reader than your Komodo or your DSMC2 one. So don't just assume that your other Red reader will universally work. And it's going back to that point that Cleigh just made there, right? As we increase to 8K at 120 and all of these increased frame rates, we're pushing that barrier. So unfortunately, the technology that was in our previous camera isn't going to work. We're not going to hinder the new technology and the new camera. We're going to continue to push that barrier. So great stuff. And we're going to continue to do that.
So moving forward to the assistant interface, this is something that I think is super cool. Being able to get access to the camera very, very quickly, not having to impede the operator or someone else working with the camera and, have full control over the entire operating system, and also have a number of really cool screens that James is going to run us through later. We've built in a load of preset screens and user screens that you can simply get to by pressing the up or down buttons. But being able to do this, it's very common within the industry to have an assistant interface come in, change your iris, your project settings, and check settings very, very quickly as well. Being able to come in and check, wait, what compression ratio are we on? What resolution? We should be at 8K 17:9, not 16:9 or something like that. And it just makes it an absolute breeze. Built on, the same design layout as Komodo, so many of you will be very familiar with that. But those of you moving from DSMC2, hopefully it will feel like a really nice transition with how logically everything is laid out. The team have worked really, really hard to get a UI that makes sense, and it's easy to get in and out of the menus that you go to very, very commonly.
Mm-hmm. And as someone that does training, I might have an hour or a half hour scheduled with the team. And typically I get there and they go, yeah, we're good, because this user interface now is so intuitive, right? They can clearly find everything, and we'll show it when we get hands-on. It's really nice that when Cleigh tells us we're shooting with some Super 35 anamorphics, I can put that camera right there in the project settings, and we don't have to guess what resolution or what our frame rate is. Really, that user interface has really been streamlined, and that's what we need on set, right? Just that speed, that ability to confirm the change and to move forward to the next shot, not questioning. And so really, I think that that's the nice thing of this user interface, is how easily it is accessible.
Yeah, and I want to shout out our first ACs out there. I just wanted to say it because it's like I personally, as someone who works with an AC a good amount of the time, we're thankful and we want to give it back, right? Like we're so like people do a lot of work and they have a lot of technical expertise, and we want to give the tools that empower you to do your job better. Like that's super cool to see, and it's nice for our camera teams out there, I think.
It's just about having those options. Like a lot of ACs now will just have their phone just attached to their side focus unit, but being able to physically go up to the camera, a DIT can do it, you know, a second AC can then go up and mount a card or something. Just having those so many options to interface, you can do everything through the screen, you know, the top LCD, everything through this side interface, everything through the phone, everything through a laptop, through Ethernet. There's so many ways you can totally control this camera. It's not just everyone crowding around one, you know, interface to the camera.
Mm-hmm. And when we're all trying to spread out and not crowd around things for obvious reasons, it's pretty nice that I can use my phone, and we'll talk a little bit more about the wireless updating on this, but if you have the preset on your laptop or on your phone, we can now wirelessly update the camera. We're not having to go and remove that camera from that MoCo rig or get it out of that gimbal. And I think that alone, back to the saving hours on set, is going to be huge, because really this could be the tool that migrates it to all the different cameras or wirelessly.
Absolutely.
Yep, leave that jib up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So the next big thing is then heat management. So, you know, 8K, 120 FPS, 2K, 600 FPS, you're thinking this thing's going to get seriously hot. And that's one of the big things that the team really had to look at to bring this camera forward into this new generation. Those of you familiar with DSMC2, you have those two fans on the top of the body that have to work very, very hard to get air through the body. One of the first big changes here is we've integrated the same fan as Ranger. So those of you who have shot with Ranger, you know you've got a 60mm fan, more efficient at getting air through the body, and it has a lower pitch as well. You know, smaller fans traditionally have a higher pitch. The larger the fan, the lower the pitch noise is. But that's not the only thing that's changed here. With DSMC2, Ranger, and also Komodo, you've just got a heat sink attached to the back of that sensor. But with this camera now, that's not the case. We've got a thermoelectric cooler, or you know, heat exchanger on the back of the sensor. And this is really, really efficient at, you know, keeping the sensor at its optimum temperature. That means if you're in a freezing cold environment, maybe here in the UK in the winter, it will heat that sensor up. But if you're out in California, where these guys are, where it's always sunny all the time, you know, it is really efficient at cooling down that sensor. And, you know, as Cleigh said in his Red Tech, if you value your relationship with your sound guy, this is going to be, you know, the camera for that, you know, being able to maintain that temperature perfectly. And also black shading, which, James, do you want to talk about the black shading?
Yeah, no, you hit the nail right on the head there with, you know, starting at the beginning of the day and then later on towards the end of the day, hey, do we need to go ahead and do another black shade? Now with the TEC and with V-Raptor, we're not going to have to do that. Essentially anywhere from 0 degrees to 40 degrees Celsius, your sensor is going to be able to stay at proper temperature. Now the question then comes up of, if I change my shutter angle or change my frames per second, that's going to be changing your E, or your exposure time. So that would cause your little E on your TE or your calibration indicator to start changing color. So really definitely something that's going to help you on the T side. On the E side, drastic frames per second or major shutter changes of more than a half second, you're going to be prompted to go ahead and do a black shade. The good news is the black shade is going much, much quicker. I mean, it's minutes, right? Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a few minutes to do a proper calibration, go ahead and point the camera in the right direction in F8 and be there, because really that's the kind of shoot you're going for.
Yeah, just some numbers there, you know, Monstro kind of around 8 minutes, kind of you know, the saying was always a minute per K, whereas this is around 4.5 minutes. So, you know, half the speed of what Monstro took, which is really great.
Mm-hmm. All right, next slide.
Moving forward onto the I/O. So as Cleigh said, having this I/O stack built into this camera is awesome. Having 2 SDI ports that can be independent or mirrored. So you can have 2 4K outputs, both being log or LUT, or you can have a 1080p with log. Your second SDI could then be the LUT, so your DIT or your director can be viewing different things, which is fantastic. You've got the 5-pin port for that dual 3-pin XLR. You can also still use 3.5mm, so there's still adapters for that. So basically any audio interface you can be working with. You've got phantom power for those XLRs. We've still got the EXT port, which is really cool. So a number of accessories that worked for Komodo, those breakout boxes, those kind of things can work with this EXT port. We've got an accessory coming that we'll tease you a little bit later on. But just this I/O stack, you know, with that built-in USB-C port, the Wi-Fi antenna, which can now do 1080p live stream over the 720p of Komodo. And on the top of the camera, we've then got the same pogo pin layout as Komodo, but thanks to the power interface that the camera has, we can now send power through those pins, and we'll discuss later about the monitor for this as well.
And I think this is a great time. When you look at that back of the camera, I know that sometimes the ask might be for full-size adapters, but we also need to keep the camera small. So that audio, that 5-pin audio connector there is keeping this camera in that small 4-inch body that we'd like. So there are going to be ways to expand that, but just remember, that's why we did that. There is some purpose built behind there. And I think that's really, you're going to like it when you have to actually carry the camera and use it on set, because it's keeping it nice and small in our form factor.
Totally. And that form factor matters a lot. I'm excited for when we do get towards the monitor and some of that stuff, because I think there's some elements of the way, like I love the functionality of DSMC2. It's still a great system to me, and being able to use some touch functionality on the top of the camera and things like that are all things that are going to, for me, make my workflow a lot easier. But it also seems like this is a great opportunity for a lot of adaptability, right? So like Johnny was saying, having different SDIs to show different people different looks based on what they're going to want to see, because a DIT and even the DP might want to see closer to something logish, right? They might want to see the values of everything that they're seeing in a more raw space. Whereas a director, they just want to see a look applied so that they know that they're okay, right? They don't want to see that, like, this look at, oh, that performance was great. Why aren't my black levels correct? Oh my God, do we have to redo that take? You know, it's like they want to see something that reassures them that what they just got was gold. But from a technical standpoint, you have other people on set who really want to see the raw values and things that are important from a technical side. So it just gives you a lot of great opportunities.
Mm-hmm. So moving on just kind of some of the sensor specs here, we'll be talking about data and those kind of bits in this kind of portion of the presentation. So yeah, as James said at the very beginning, you know, it's an all new sensor, and that's really, you know, what enabled us to get these high frame rates. You know, a lot of what enables high frame rates is built into the sensor design itself, you know, integrating that phase detect autofocus into the sensor. You know, we've got the lowest noise floor of any kind of RED camera, and I think Cleigh can really attest to this through a lot of the tests that he's done. That noise texture is very, very different to what we've experienced with Monstro. A lot of that kind of cross-hatching, Cleigh, has kind of now been, you know, changed for V-Raptor. It's a lot more pleasing.
Exactly. And just the structure that you're seeing, the shapes of things. And what I equate it to is it's really great, because when I first started shooting on RED, I was shooting other digital formats before that and not very pleased about a lot of it. And then when I came to RED, that was one of the first things I noticed, is like, hey, the grain structure of this looks like a filmic grain structure. And even that wasn't quite enough, right? Like as we get further and further, we start to see like, oh, you know what? There are some elements of this that feel man-made, right? And now this one is one where I'm in there pixel peeping going like, shoot, this looks natural. Like it just doesn't have a lot. It feels very organic. It doesn't have a lot of hard edges and things like that, or like Johnny was saying, cross-hatching, or things that start to feel like digital. And for me, that's huge for a lot of people, especially people who stylistically like to push their ISO high for a grittier look. You get a much more naturalistic look out of this lower noise floor. And if you're pushing for things like stuff that Gemini was capable of, this low noise floor plus super sampling, man, that gets you right in the zone where I love Gemini. It's a great sensor for what it's built for, but this does some of those things just as well. And so that for me is right back to that conversation of, this is a camera that's multi-format. It sits in your bag and it can do all the different tasks you're asking of it.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to quote Graham, dual sensitivity is great, but large format and Redcode allows us to even hide some of those things. So, right, that super sampling is a key thing there, right? Shooting 8K or 6K and then being able to finish down at a 5K or lower resolution and still have those incredible frame rates while still being super 35 or full frame starting point. Huge right there. And then I think it's also worth talking about the new improved OLPF stack. So if you liked what we saw with KOMODO, right, it's a little bit of the skin tone highlight and the standard OLPF blend, but really less of that smearing, less of those artifacts, and really right out of camera, a really beautiful image. So I've really been liking that.
Yeah, those magenta dots, man. It's a huge one. For some scenarios, you can't avoid it, right? So there's situations with light, sunsets right behind people, things like that, it's really tough to avoid that effect. And I have not been able to get the camera to do it, which was a huge one for me. I'm trying.
and that was where skin tone highlight was great, because you could point it right down Main Street and protect yourself, but you needed the low light protection that standard would offer you. And that's why it's kind of nice to have this best blend of both. And this was the slide we were talking about earlier, Johnny, where you could look at all of our sensors here and see that, you know what, you might look at this and say, okay, well, there's 4 Super 35 and then 2 multi-format, but really there's 6 multi-format or 6 Super 35 sensors here, and then 2 that are multi-format, right? The 2 at the top are both full frame or VistaVision and Super 35. But I think the great thing about V-Raptor is you now have face detection autofocus. You now have twice as fast sensor scan speed as well as frame rates. And then you also have all of that incredible form factor, that new lighter form factor, or smaller form factor.
I mean, moving on then very quickly to what that means multi-format wise is it's creative options. It's being able to choose any lens that you like, if that's a Cooke S4i or maybe a really old obscure Russian lens that has a distinct look that matches your commercial, your short film, whatever you want to do, but it only covers S16 or S35. Being able to still have a high resolution image if you want to be, you know, Netflix approved, or just because everyone now has at least a 4K TV, being able to super sample down to that is just really, really awesome. And, you know, we've implemented now a whole new wave of anamorphic D-squeeze options, 2, 1.8, 1.6, 1.5, 1.3, 1.25 times. So effectively any lens you want to use, Raptor can accommodate to that. And, you know, Cleigh, I know you've been working on some videos that are coming soon talking about this and what that means lens wise. And, you know, that's really where a large format, high resolution BB sensor comes into play.
Exactly. S16 at over 2K. Just think about that for a second. Think about how small S16's image circle really is. And you're getting over 2K in that space. That's gigantic. Like, and you talk about the frame rates that unlocks there in that same scenario, and you're going, oh wow, this thing that maybe would be, once again, a specialty camera, right? Something that you're going and saying, okay, well, we want to shoot this 16 mil lens, we want to mix it in with this, how are we going to digitize, we're going to shoot film stock, what's the plan for this? Like, now you have the opportunity to say, okay, let's window in on the sensor, I'm going to get these great frame rates. It's awesome if you're trying to do like shots like wildlife, where you want to be that much closer to subject without actually being that much closer to subject, right? It does a lot of huge things for that. And then the flip side as well is that if you're looking to shoot super high frame rate as you window down in, it's good to know that, okay, well, I can pick up an S35, say 8-15 from Canon, which doesn't even really fully cover S35. I can then shoot that at this crazy high frame rate, get full coverage out of that lens for something like action sports, where that bubble fisheye is actually really beneficial for enhancing the appearance of movement on frame. That, like, you're now in a place where, oh, I can choose 240 frames per second and I can shoot it on an 8-15. Like, they're just, you know, you're like, okay, well, that starts getting me in this place where I'm pretty excited about these choices that I have, and I'm not feeling limited on what lens choices or technical choices go with those lenses. I'm more just saying, hey, I have a camera that can do just about anything I envision. Now let's dial in that vision and source what we're doing and actually execute it.
I mean, especially thanks to that RF mount, as we said at the very beginning, there's a load of speed boosters for S35. So you can get that EF 24-70 or some of those really wide EF lenses that cover large format sensors, get on a speed booster, thanks to that RF mount. Again, even more flexibility.
Yep.
And I was just going to say, I think in the next slide, yep, here's that 70-200. that I shot down in 2K at 594 frames per second. But at 2K, this was essentially a 600 millimeter lens. I would have never been able to get that close to that seagull without doing a lens change, without switching it out. And once again, was able to get this art of flight, or this essentially, this bird taking off right here, and then easily use my presets, which we'll show you here in camera, to go back to the 4K 300 or the 8K 120 that I was shooting there for my principal capture.
Okay. Can I share for a second? I have something almost as majestic.
Almost
as majestic.
Oh, it's going to be,
Maybe.
Let's see it.
All right, here we go. So we'll optimize our clip here. Let's do this. Okay, here we are. Going for it. Thank you, James. It only hurt the right kind of way.
Okay.
James was kind enough to help me out with that one in one of my tests for these upcoming red techs, and it's fun. Like we're creative people. We're out here doing creative work in the world. We should be having fun. We should take it seriously and be passionate about what we're doing. But this is an amazingly fun camera. The first things I thought of are just things that were a lark. I mean, yes, all the exciting stuff that you're going to be able to do on set and unlock people's creativity for narratives and things like that. All that potential is there. But I just want to remind everybody, like, be a kid, like, have fun. This is an opportunity. This is technology that doesn't always come around. I'm very excited to share with you guys just how cool this stuff is.
Anytime you want me to come by and smack you over the head with a light bulb, Cleigh, we'll do that again. Right?
All right, good. Well, no more than once a week. Try to keep some wits about me.
Well, I'll go ahead and get the share back up. I know we're conscious of time. So James, do you want to talk about this one? We'll try and fire these off to get to the Q&A.
Yeah, we'll fire these off and then we'll save some time for the Q&A. Now, what we're looking at here is two illustrative representations of the sensor scan difference between V-Raptor on the left and then Monstro on the right. Now, these aren't the actual ones because we wouldn't be able to see it very well with our eye, but you can see that V-Raptor is twice as fast. Now, regardless of your frame rate, regardless of your shutter, that twice as fast scan speed is going to allow you to greatly reduce any rolling shutter artifacts you're seeing my jello fingers right now, right? It's about as close as you can get to a global shutter while still being 8K 120 or these incredibly high frame rates. Now, we do have a true global shutter camera, which is our KOMODO sitting right over here. But remember, this camera tops out at 6K 40 frames per second, definitely not 8K 120. And really, that's where this incredibly fast scan speed is going to be great for virtual productions, handheld, fast moving objects. I've seen a lot of nodding over here. You guys are agreeing exactly with me with that twice as fast speed here. But any other things that I was missing there, guys?
No, I think you hit on something important, that KOMODO does a really specific thing, and it's built amazingly for what KOMODO does. And V-Raptor does something a little different. And I know people would be hungry for better frame rates on KOMODO and things like that, but everything in these two cameras is built, like I said, up to the limit, right? Like all the way up to what's possible with this technology. And so that was one thing that popped out to me, was a great example of, hey, KOMODO does these things, V-Raptor does these things really well. And when you're talking about scan speed, they're probably the two closest, right? You're least likely to get rolling shutter artifacts on these two sensors of our lineup.
Next slide.
So moving forward to Redcode. So this is something that, myself, James, and Cleigh have always had many questions about, which compression ratio do I choose for what I'm doing? With the SMC2, it was, do I do 5 or 6 or 7? What's the difference? What about 8, 9, 10? What am I missing here? Looking at images, comparing them, pixel peeping, all these kind of things. And that's really what we learned, is we wanted to simplify it down to make those decisions very, very easy. Like with KOMODO, we introduced this new flavor of Redcode. We've now got HQ, MQ, and LQ. And each of them, we've kind of streamlined it down to a couple of, types of shooting that would dictate choosing this kind of compression ratio. So HQ, around 360 megabytes a second. Again, these are variable depending on the complexity in your scene. That's a specialty. That's where you're pulling stills, you're doing VFX. And you've got the money for that storage where money is no object. You're on a big production. I want as much quality as I can get out of the camera. And this new compression is above what Monstro could do. So Monstro tapped out at 250 megabytes a second, 300-ish, and now going beyond that with a lower compression for those clients that want highest possible image quality, this is where that's going to sit for you. But we really see most customers sitting between MQ and LQ. MQ being where Monstro tapped out, you know, that kind of Netflix spec, streaming quality spec, cinema, episodic TV, indie films, you know, all those kind of things. And then for those that need longer takes or a bit more conscious of storage, LQ, you know, streaming, web, all those kind of things at around 180 megabytes a second is going to really be where you're going to want to sit. Obviously, when you ramp up to 8K 120, all bets are off 800 megabytes a second, which is still very, very small comparative to a lot of other cameras that shoot 120 FPS raw out there. But, you know, that's kind of the options that you've got looking forward to here. And Cleigh, you know, I'm sure you've been shooting and I've seen amount of footage over the last few months. You know, how has it been for you?
You can't discount exactly what you're saying, which is that, man, HQ is heavy, right? So you're going to fill up cards faster, especially if you're trying to shoot higher frame rates with it. For me, I haven't needed to be out of MQ. The only times I've really been outside of MQ are when I was specifically needing to shoot frame rates that are only possible with LQ. I've been pulling stills. I know traditionally, right? Like we put those up there to say, hey, if your main gig is stills and you're really pixel peeping those stills, you're going to get the best out of HQ. I've been getting pretty damn good results out of MQ myself, stuff that's showing up in the website, going out in our social platforms. And some of that's based on limiting myself on frame rates that I wanted to shoot, or, hey, I'm out here for the full day. I have 2 cards. That was a mistake. I probably need to reduce the quality that I'm shooting right now. Like those are the little things that happen. And especially in sort of the more owner operator realm, little bit of set work, little bit of commercial work, that kind of stuff happens all the time. Like there's just, you know, oh, you forgot this one thing, or, oh man, the client wants to go an extra 2 hours. They've added on this shot, this thing. Okay, let me look at my media. Okay, we have 2 more cards. Let's go ahead and switch to LQ right now. Save some for later if we have a VFX scene or whatever. For me, it's been the same way I thought about my compression ratios before, just a lot simpler. I'm just really going mostly with what the spec is that I need. And then beyond that, making negotiations. If, oh, okay, this is a VFX shot, you know what, you're right, let's back off. Let's go to HQ mode, shoot, you know, a lower frame rate based on needing to make that decision.
I mean, especially when we're talking a lot of the time to producers, or if you're a DIT speaking with your DP about estimates for how much storage you'll need. You know, speaking to a DP, many times I remember going, well, we could do 6:1, we'll get this, but if we do 5:1 or 7:1, these are the options. And then it starts to complicate that discussion. Or if you're talking to a producer, they just go, well, can we not do 20:1? Because I can see that from your sheet, we've got 15 hours of runtime. But having these kind of discernible qualities, you know, it makes that discussion easier. If the producer goes, I want the best quality footage out of this, you go, HQ, we can do that, but this is what it's going to cost. And you go, oh, actually, going to MQ, we still get fantastic quality, Netflix spec, all this kind of stuff. And, you know, these are the savings we've got. And we've just got a little bit of an idea of a 660 gig card on this document here as to what that's roughly going to get you. Obviously, scene complexity will differ depending on what's going on, but just to give you a rough outline of what to expect, just thought we'd get a little slide up for you here.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is good because when you're talking about, remember, HQ, MQ, and LQ, they're all 16-bit raw. Right? Yeah. This is all of the benefit of IPP2 here. I don't want customers to think, well, I have to shoot everything in HQ. HQ is best quality, MQ is visually lossless, and LQ is virtually visually lossless. If we're taking out 100+ megabytes, you can't say that it's best. No, you have to say that there's some level of compression in there. But remember, virtually visually lossless, and I challenge you to do your own takes. And really, I think we have a slide here where we show some comparisons, where if we're saying 300 or 360 or 25 minutes or 35 minutes, if you compare that with maybe some of the other cameras, we're still well under that data mark, and you're still able to shoot all of that, maybe at your high quality, but be conscious of what your deliverable is and know that you can make changes like Cleigh just suggested there, where, hey, there's an additional shot on the end of the day's log here. Maybe we go down to LQ or MQ, because remember, they're both visually lossless and they're both 16-bit raw.
I mean, that's the thing, as James was saying there, in comparison to other raw codecs, we're still incredibly flexible in what we get. You know, some other 6K raw cameras or 4.5K raw cameras, they're still very, very heavy, even in their most kind of compressed format. And Redcode is really still kind of the outlier here in the LQ 8K 120 at 180 megabytes a second is really, really efficient kind of in this space at this level for this kind of camera. Obviously, you can get codecs that are very, very highly compressed and no longer raw, but to have a 16-bit raw workflow with these kind of data rates is really, really unique. And I think now moving forward onto some of the accessories. So James, I know that you've been using one, and Cleigh, what are your talks on this really exciting bit of gear we've got here?
Oh my goodness. I love that thing. I'm a really big fan of ease of use, right? So being able to touch my settings and make adjustments and scroll through playback through swiping and stuff like that on this monitor makes me feel like I'm kind of back in the DSMC2 world. And I do think one thing that I've noticed is, man, you get used to that little Komodo top screen where you're touching stuff, you know? It's like it at first I was kind of like, what am I going to use this thing for? And to be honest, I use it all the time, right? And so just in the transition, when I first started using this camera, I was using just an SDI monitor, and I was like, come on, to change, you know, once you've shot Red for a while, you're used to that touch functionality on the monitors. It becomes hard to separate yourself from it. Like if your phone suddenly had buttons again and you had to do text messages and you're like, 1, 2, 3, okay, that's an A. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a B. You know, I think that's like kind of the idea for me, is that being able to use that touch functionality, it's hugely beneficial. That's why I love connecting wirelessly, like James is showing right now. Is I'm using my phone to do that same sort of touch functionality, but I think it's a little bit more natural, a little bit more automatic when it comes off of that top monitor. Very easy for my workflow. Slip right into my old habits of DSMC2. Good ones or bad ones.
This is also something that's kind of had an iterational upgrade of what we've learned from DSMC2. You know, DSMC2, you could have a direct attach monitor, or you could have the monitor that had the LEMO connection and you had an adapter to attach it to the camera. This is the best of both worlds, where you've got a system that can direct attach to the camera through this little USB-C style cable, but then also that little arm that you can see attaching the monitor to the RMI, the Red monitor interface. You can take that off, and then you can have longer cables that we'll be selling, you know, a meter, that kind of thing, meter plus. You can then mount that then wherever you want. You know, if it's on a gimbal, you know, Cleigh does loads of gimbal work, and being able to have a monitor that still does that elsewhere, rigged elsewhere, is really, really flexible. And as the logo suggests there, we partnered up with Small HD, you know, work with the guys that do these things best. You know, we worked with them to develop this monitor, have a fantastic panel that's really color accurate, and have a UI that is really, really flexible. So being built on Page OS, but with that Red flare, that Red ease of use, all of those Red features and functions. You know, you can move the autofocus points around. You've got assignable buttons on the monitor, and having that built on top of all of the Small HD filters and features, swiping around with them, it's such a really beautiful experience to have. And we'll show you some of the stuff it can do a little bit later on and pick it up and show it around.
Waveform, vector scope, some of the things that maybe my camera assistants have been asking for some time. It's really nice to have that built right into Small HD's custom pages, right? With the 2-finger swipes, you can have those other pages. And I know for myself, for my Komodo, I don't have to necessarily bring that additional LP battery or that P-tap, because this is pulling power directly from the camera as well. So more ways to just keep that nice and light.
And just touching back on that form factor. So no, you can go to the next slide, but I just was just going to say the 15 mil rod attachment that you actually use on the bottom of the monitor there is huge. Like I do a ton of gimbal work, like you were saying. I also have like a Mantis rig that I throw on my shoulder, and being able to adjust straight to 15 mil rod, which is pretty common, right? Like industry standard stuff. There's tons of things that use 15 mil rod, even like little EVF posts that come off the side of cameras and stuff like that, that I think is going to be really useful for that monitor specifically, because you still get that touch functionality through the longer cable. You can move that thing anywhere on your rig you want to. It's great.
And then just to kind of finish up here, you know, the other accessories that we've kind of got coming out and available. We've obviously got the Red Micro Vs and charger, designed to be super small, partnered with Core on those. We've got the Angel Bird cards. And one of the things that I think everyone on this chat and in this room is excited to look at is the Creative Solutions accessories that we've partnered with to bring a fully cinevised camera straight from the get-go from Red. We've worked with Dominic from Creative Solutions, who came from Panavision, and he's worked on these accessories with us and Matt Tremblay and the team here. And we've got a really exciting portfolio coming up to spec this camera out to what you need for those cine high-end environments. Even just if you work with a small crew, this is the kind of the rig that we've designed and we think works best for that. We've got the XLR breakouts, we've got the quick release plates with 15mm rod support, we've got modular top handles, we've got the EXT breakout ports that give you Genlock timecode, 3-pin run stop. We've got a gold mount adapter, a V-Lock adapter if you want to use larger batteries that tie into things like the top plate and give you multiple 2-pin LEMO outputs, a light for the side AC screen. All of these things we've worked very hard, discussed with the team here. What do we want in a rig? Let's design this and get this rig just to be complete. And I think, Cleigh, you've already had a little bit of a sneak peek at it. What are your first impressions?
I'm honestly almost as, I was like waiting for, I'm like, oh, is it my turn? Like, I'm almost as excited about these accessories as I am about this camera. I think the whole deal is like, we've done some amazing things with some of the partnerships we're working on, and working through these products is, to me, the greatest thing, because realistically, like you said earlier, these are people who make these products incredibly well, and to be able to bring our style and our functionality into those realms where the products are already great. We just need to have them interface with us in a way that's very beneficial for the cameras and the camera teams that run them. And this is going to do it. Like, this is the package that you need to pick up if you're going to do just about anything, right? I mean, you could say, okay, if you're just trying to go handheld or you're just trying to be on a gimbal, there's a benefit to just picking up the camera in this form, right? In this real simple, nice little chunk of kit. It goes with you wherever you need to. But I would argue that if you do documentary work, narrative work, high-end commercial work, the majority of your basic well-paying gigs, not taking a knock at anybody, but realistically, a lot of those higher end gigs, this is the kind of kit that you need. And everybody's going to walk on set, each different player. Oh, you brought your press in. Oh, I'm used to this setup. Everything's going to be closer to industry standard, the way that you're expecting on other camera systems. And I think that's one of the things that I'm super excited about with this set of accessories.
And it's how it all ties together as well. Everything locks in together. The top plate goes into the battery plate, which goes into the base plate, which goes into the expander module. All of this stuff ties in so well that it's really robust on there. Everything can be shaking around, there's no movement between any of those things, where a lot of adapters, this adapter may work with this third-party accessory that you've bought from this other manufacturer, and none of it really ties together. All of this we've made so it ties together really, really well.
Yep. Things like ARCA plates, other standards that we're able to incorporate that are going to work automatically with other bits of kit that you already have.
Mm-hmm. And other bits of kit, so you can see that you have the same 2 3/8 bolts and quarter 20 right here on the bottom. So that's worth coming out. And then now we're looking at that side user interface right here. And notice that, like we said earlier, you're not seeing that this is a preview screen, but this is that camera user interface screen. So if you're familiar with your Red tools, you can hit down once, and then there's your histogram or your RGB parade. Down one more time.
Yep.
There's your tools, right, where we can go quickly through peaking, edge, false color, everything that we're also familiar with. And I like going up because these are my user pages. Now, this isn't my personal camera, but this is where I would have 8 different hard buttons for every single user page. And maybe myself as the operator might have one, and then my AC might have one, and then my DIT could have their own independent page. And I want to make that point that I talked about earlier, is that if my phone is the vehicle that's saving the presets, all you have to do is come right over here and look at that. There's my presets right there on my phone. And I can easily go over to Cleigh's studio, or hopefully get on a plane and come over to Johnny, and then bring my presets with me. And so when I arrive back to that standardization, you're going to be able to know that your accessories and everything in your kit works, and then be able to know that all of your presets and functions are saved right here to your phone as well.
I mean, that's the really cool thing, being able to, for example, I've been building a lot of presets. So I will have my 6K-S35 high-speed preset, my just standard 8K 17:9 preset, having sensor flip, having, SDI magnify, all of these things that are very commonly, gone into, you can have there. And there's so many cool things you can do with that menu. I mean, James, if you want to show real quick, if you hold down the top button where we've got the shutter speed and white balance. If you hold down those buttons, yeah, it will just change to 50th of a second. If you then do white balance, it will change it then into daylight and standardize it. Again, just make it really easy. All of these things the team have worked hard on to make it really, really easy to work with and quick. We don't want you to spend time in the menus. Get in, make a change, and get back out again, and start shooting. As Cleigh says, you always press for time.
And how many times do you get asked this question? What's the max frame rate, right? Any camera AC can walk right up to this, see the frames per second, touch the hard physical button right there and scroll right down and see whatever that is. I think that alone probably saves me about 10 different questions on set.
Yeah, it's great. That side UI is really, really nice. It gives a lot of functionality and it's really easy to use. That just comes down to the basis of it. Like you were saying, is you don't have to answer as many questions because all you do is click through a couple pages and you start to learn really quickly. Like if you click down once, you got aperture right there. There's these little things that are already built in that once you start using the camera, you realize, oh, easy, right? If I'm using an RF lens or I'm using an EF lens, boom, quick change to my aperture, quick change to these little things. They're all on these little pages that have been custom designed so that the page itself offers an ease of use and nice functionality. So it's, to me, that those are the kind of things that make stuff like a side AC useful instead of just being there, right? Like you could have it there and dig through all the menus the old way that you used to, and it's going to be just as tough to use as if you're digging through the menus from the top monitor. But having these pages that put all the things you quickly use frequently in these different layouts allows you to very easily adjust different parameters of the camera.
And it also means that people can be working on different things. When we're looking at things like the monitor, as a DP, you could be coming in with the monitor, making changes to, your frame rate, or maybe you're changing the LUT that you have. Whereas an AEC is coming in through the ACI and they're changing the output that they're controlling, while the DIT is remoted in over his Ethernet connection and adjusting a CDL, or he could be uploading a new LUT to the camera that he's just done. All of these things kind of working in tandem, and that's really where the beauty of this cohesiveness really comes through. All of these ways of connecting to the camera just give that flexibility.
Yeah, and no more everybody taking turns going up to the camera table, right? I mean, look, seriously, everybody does, right? So like, okay, now it's AC's turn. He rolls up and he does his thing, and the DIT comes, I got the card, it's got the thing, like, we gotta get it. It's like it can create a frantic environment when everybody's trying to get at that one piece in the middle of the set. This gives you so many options to make those changes. Like Johnny was saying, it's like, it's definitely going to change how people do this. And I also think it's even people who aren't necessarily making changes, but say having an iPad for hair and makeup to take a peek at feed for last looks so they're not crowding around Video Village or things like that. These are all places. Art department can be looking at props. All of these things are great opportunities. And we've talked about it with Komodo, but these are the type of things that are carrying through in this new camera system.
Mm-hmm. And you can see it right now. I'm using two phones. One's perhaps the audio team here monitoring my in-camera audio, and the other could be my camera assistant team that's maybe making an aperture change here. And once again, this is where I would say, make sure you have your password set and you don't have people that shouldn't be controlling your camera, or this might also be a good time to maybe lock out an iPad and then go give it to maybe that director that likes to get in there and meddle so they're not in there changing your stuff while you're mid-shot.
I think this point will probably be quite good if we transition over to a bit of Q&A. So I've just asked the team here just to start firing us some questions. So I think we'll probably go into a bit of a 3-box here. And yeah, we'll kind of open this up to see what you guys want to know, because all of us have been enjoying it very much so, playing around with this camera.
Yeah, I didn't think that you guys enjoyed the camera at all. I thought based on this whole presentation, you guys were very disappointed.
Very good actors.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, first of all, let me just say, James, Cleigh, Jonathan, Frank, Matt, everybody at Red, the whole Red team. There's too many of you guys to name. Thank you guys so much, for spending the last hour talking about, the new product, the old product, everything that, is in between, answering questions from everybody who's got questions. So, we really appreciate it. It's something that we've been working on a long time, trying to get this going. So thanks so much for all the time and everything. the first question I want to tap into, and this is kind of like a freebie up in the air. Whoever wants to grab it and jump at it first, go right ahead. I'm no holds barred. Okay, Cleigh is obviously ready for the no holds barred, life with the fluorescent lights and everything cracking over his back. So will there be a black V-Raptor available? And if there is, when can we expect that?
I'll take this one because I knew you were going to lead with a nice, easy, soft pitch for me here. Like many of our other releases, we traditionally do the limited edition, the white ST release, and then there is a black production camera that does come shortly sometime thereafter. We don't have a release date to provide right now, but right now on B&H or on red.com, you can go ahead and put your name and your contact information as an interest list. And this is going to be something that we're very soon going to be coming out with, but I can't give you any real dates or indications here. And just know you can always continue to stay tuned to red.com or our socials, or if you know the drill, you follow Jared, because Jared's probably going to release when there's something new coming out. And we didn't talk about it too much, but Red does talk about some of our future camera stuff, like the Raptor XL, which is going to be our larger camera, which will be coming out in 2022. And I'm sure we'll get some questions on that, but it is good to have a little bit of idea of what's coming out next. And that's what I thank you for allowing us this chance to do, to talk a little bit about the new camera coming out. And so I hope we answered that question there.
Yeah, no, thanks for talking about it. I mean, I feel terrible carrying around my cell phone now, but but maybe I'll upgrade to one of the Red cameras just because, So can I match the color and look between a DSM-C2 sensors and the Raptor?
Yes. That's a pretty easy blanket one. I think Johnny could even take us a little deeper into how some of that works, but just as a general, know that R3Ds match R3Ds, right? So if you want to go into post, you're going to have an easy time taking those R3Ds and putting them in a similar starting point.
I mean, awesome. Yeah, kind of building off from that. That's one of the things that as a DIT, you always get every camera up, have a look at them, what's different here, because, every camera there'll be subtle nuances. We're talking silicon here, we're talking electronics. There's always some degree of variance. So looking at them, but it's really the ease of how that, works together. Because, a lot of productions, I'll have 4 Monstros, 4 Raptors. But now we're moving into this era where, hey, I might have 2 V-Raptors and a KOMODO. So these are completely different technologies: rolling shutter, global shutter, S35 large format. And that's where, as a DIT, when you start getting action cameras in, I'd be working with a load of Red cameras and you get this action camera in. It's like, okay, how am I going to match these? It's completely different architecture, not even RAW. And that's what this really allows you to do. You've got 16-bit RAW, you're working in IPP2, all the same LUTs are going to work. And it's that base level that really enables you to now go, this is a really easy matching process now, because I haven't got to build a conversion LUT. I haven't got to go from action camera log into Red log, convert to 709. It's just a really easy ballpark to start playing with. And everyone that has worked with Red before and multiple cameras knows that it's a really easy base point to start working from. So you shouldn't have any issues there, other than, a little bit of color experience just to work out, a bit of magenta, a bit of green, a bit of there, that kind of thing.
Right? Kind of a trick question, right? Because you have the exact same lens on those different cameras. And even at the exact same lens, is it a lens that maybe is, say, built around the same time? Because even those years between when something is built at different places, especially in lens manufacturing and coatings, that's going to make a difference as well. So it's like Johnny said, about that starting point, about everything being in a place where now we're looking pretty close. We're using 16-bit RAW and building a look that works for everything.
And I will just add one more point on there. I think the key thing is when we're talking DSM-C2 and maybe some DSM-C3 and KOMODO cameras, maybe the preset doesn't carry across all of them. But if you go back to that data comparison slide, what you can do is you can make sure you're shooting maybe 5:1 on your Monstro, and then MQ on your V-Raptor, and then we have similar LUTs. And then we already talked about similar lenses. So really, your data footprint's going to be very similar. Your DIT maybe touches that one clip or that one bin slightly differently, but back to that neutral starting point. You're starting at that very similar starting point and not a bait and swap from the beginning of our grade.
Cool. So I'm gonna hit you with one more that this might be a softball too, but I think you guys can handle it regardless, even if it's a hard ball. Is there autofocus on the new V-Raptor, and will it work on all lenses that you put on it?
So the answer is yes, there is autofocus. You can use that with RF lenses or EF lenses. We do have a compatibility list on red.com. If you go to our FAQ section, there's a list of lenses that we've tested. But really one of the things that I found, I'm sure Cleigh and James, you can speak to this, is it depends about the gearing that's built into the lens. So, you know, the nifty 50 that everyone always gets, you know, that Canon 50mm, the gearing inside of that is very different to the brand new RF 24-70, which the gearing in that has been a dream. And I've really enjoyed working with the RF glass with a large format sensor. So that's one of the things to really look out for is, you know, the higher end glass will probably work a bit better because of the gearing in there. But yes, you do. And being PDAF, it works really, really nicely.
Yeah, I'm glad you were the first one to say it, so it didn't have to be me. But better lens, better autofocus, right? And that's just part of it. So the quality of the lens is going to matter in some of those conversations. I've been using RF stuff, like Johnny said, it's been great, like really great. And even extending into EF stuff as well. But it just really comes down to that combination of, you know, is it on the approved list? And then combine that with the idea of, you know, a cheaper lens is probably going to work cheaper. It's just
obviously
the reality.
Other lenses will work, so Sigmas and Tamrons and things. But
exactly.
There's so many EF lenses out there. Our poor engineers can't spend the whole day testing every single EF variant that's there. So we mainly test the Canon variants, but mileage, you know, I've been working with, you know, Sigma 18-35s and been really impressed with those. So definitely have a little test if you can. If you can go into B&H, have a little test of a lens to see how it performs, and then that can dictate your buying purchases as to which lenses suit you as well.
And also be conscious of what you're shooting. Am I shooting Cleigh in the Talking Heads interview where he's going to stay there, right? That's where I would select a zone or select a box and maybe it's vertical center, and you can do continuous that way. If I'm doing maybe something that's like cars with my gimbal, I might try a more vertical or a more horizontal box, or, you know, change your autofocus zone. And once again, if you have the app up, having this with just a nice little like C-map like this or a little phone mount, I can have this and just do a quick little touch to zoom or get little spot focus if I need to. So I'd say a nice little clamp like this could be a great way to make that autofocus be much more reliable and much more something that I'd trust. If maybe Cleigh's moving around and dancing and bobbing and weaving, then I can move that center point left or right if he's not staying right there in his mark.
And that's one of the questions I've seen a lot about. Can the DSM-C3 monitor, will you be able to control the focus through this? And yes, you can. You get a little box, you can move it around, you can change all the sizes. You know, this is a really fantastic way to interface with that very, very quickly. But you can also still do it through the app or through the menu interfaces, which may not be as quick, but it can be done basically anywhere.
All right, so I'm going to wrap this all up because I'm sure you guys are getting hungry. I'm sure you guys want to go grab something to eat, right? David's joining us here on YouTube and wants to know, will the new electronic ND from Red be a RF to PL only, or are you guys going to plan for different mount options as well?
I guess I'll take that one, being part of the product team. So currently it will just be RF to PL, you know, obviously with that beautiful variable ND. You know, obviously, let us know the kind of things that you would love to see. We love taking on all feedback, but for the moment, from what Jared teased on that live stream, just RF to PL at the moment.
Wonderful.
For EF, there is the RF to EF with the drop-in ND trait. Now that is a variable ND. We all know what comes with that, but there are other great partners like Breakthrough and other third party that are going to be making more either rear lens filtration or front of the lens filtration options for EF.
Excellent, excellent. Well, again, I want to extend another hearty thanks to all of you guys, Jonathan, Cleigh, James, Frank, Matt. I got like a whole list here that's written down. Everybody at Red, you know, for supporting this and getting this set up together. I do want to remind everybody, I know we've talked about it before, but you can definitely check out the Red products in store at B&H. We have Red products out there on the display, and I believe, if you maybe you guys do know or don't know, but we actually have a wonderful, beautiful Red display in there where you can check them out. You can go in there. I know the studio's got some Red products as well that aren't necessarily on the sales floor. So if you're looking to check out any of the new stuff, definitely make sure to get into the store because we want
with the KOMODO, right? A hands-on KOMODO that they can walk in and actually touch, right? I believe so.
I believe you're correct about that. Correct about that. And you know, the sales guys, they're waiting for you. They're waiting for you to come in and ask them questions, and you know, hopefully they'll do as good of a job as these guys did. But if not, you know, come back, get some more information over here. Just want to say thanks again to everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. This has been another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. We'll catch you all next time.
Thank you.